and I'm Elisa Bielatich Davis, and I'm here today with Juliana Joyce. Welcome, Juliana.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, I'm excited to have you on. You actually were recommended as a guest. I was
Oh,
told you have to talk to Juliana Joyce. And I was like, good, let's do it.
thank
so,
you.
so I kind of know where this is going because I know you started an academy, but you started an Orthodox school, right?
Yes, we started St. George Classical Academy located in Boxford, Massachusetts, just north of Boston,
Yeah.
and we opened our doors last school year. So we are in our second year.
Oh, that's neat. There are so many people who want to get an Orthodox school going, but it never gels, it never works out. So thank God you were able to do that. And is it going well?
It is. I mean, it's interesting that you say so many people want to do it because I think it's been a lifelong dream. I may not have known it was a dream my whole life, but it definitely was revealed throughout my professional journey in education. And honestly, it was by the grace of God that the resources came together at the right time and we were able to start. And so there's so many miracles. And I think that those miracles have given us the sort of momentum to keep going. So it's been an incredible 2 years. But also with struggle, of course, whenever you try to do something beautiful, there are challenges along the way, but we have been so blessed.
Oh, and I think as you're saying, like it all came together, right? Just sort of, you can feel God just removes the obstacles and it happens sometimes. I feel like sometimes you're trying to do something really good and it's like resisting, resisting, resisting. And it's not, I feel like sometimes it's not so much like, oh, Satan doesn't want you to do it because it's a good thing. Maybe sometimes it's actually God holding back. And then suddenly he just opens the gate. And it's like, okay, now this is the time. Like it was in God's time that it needed to happen. Get all the right people lined up, go. And it's just such a neat thing when that happens.
That couldn't be more the case. I think so. I could start at the beginning, but just in terms of education, I was working as a public school principal over the last 10 years. And really, when I became a public school administrator, I started visiting classical schools and learning more about classical pedagogy and that world, which seemed more obvious to me at a college level or even a high school level. But being an elementary educator, I was wondering, what does this look like for young children? And so visiting schools led me to start building relationships and networking. And I actually learned of an institute called the Circe Institute, and they have a 3-year apprenticeship program. And I sort of just jumped in. I'm like, okay, this is what I need to get the professional training. And I showed up and did that. And of course, a lot of other things influenced the actual timing, but there was a preparation that went on. And throughout that, I was like, okay, it was just unknown when they would all come together or if it would come together.
Wow. Oh, that's neat. So did you kind of like back into, like, were you looking at classical education and thinking that you would use it in public schools and like that it would maybe broaden what you're doing there, and then you sort of just got more involved in classical education and decided to do private school? Is that how that worked? Like, how did you get involved in the idea even of an Orthodox school?
Well, ultimately, honestly, I was raised in an Orthodox home, and my father is a priest, and my mother is a teacher and an artist. And I think probably that foundation, though I went to public school myself and I wasn't classically educated formally, I think, of course, the education is so holistic, and being raised in the faith, that was such a part of my life and my formation. And in addition to that, I would say the dinner table conversations growing up and the books that my parents read to us and the way that they exposed us to culture. And again, my mother's an artist, so we loved going to museums. And there were just so many parts of my childhood that ultimately I think planted the seeds. My father went to St. John's College, which is a great books school. And I think probably one of his greatest sadnesses is that none of his children followed that path. So he certainly brought that to our formation. And then I I graduated college. I went and immediately got my master's degree in elementary education, and I became a classroom teacher. And I don't, there was so much beauty in teaching, and ultimately, I love the creativity of it. I love to write. I love the relational part of it. I love to learn, and teaching really, I didn't expect to become a teacher, but it all unfolded. And so there was real beauty in that work, and it was very meaningful. Of course, being a public school educator, there are pieces of the child that you can never mention, of course, like the spiritual formation of a child. And I always did feel like something was missing. So I think it led me in a direction, although um, in the last probably 5 to 10 years, my professional journey, it just became more clear. And I think some of that was that I stepped out of the classroom and became an administrator. And interestingly, I had a lot less autonomy as an administrator.
Oh,
And
that
so
makes sense.
I missed the classroom, honestly. I still love to teach. So that was probably part of ultimately what led me to start a school. I became an administrator wanting to make a larger impact. And then I think, the reality of society and the world and the complications just revealed themselves. And I think in that, I got more and more motivated to learn more about classical education. I don't think that I expected to bring that into public school necessarily. I don't know exactly how it's going to come, but I do think probably I wanted to start a school.
Yeah. So, so I have a lot of questions. I also want to
Yes.
do a quick vocab check, really quick, because our
Yeah.
listeners, we're talking about classical education, and you were just bringing something else up too that I find really interesting, but I know that it's a term that probably not everyone understands. But classical education, in a nutshell, what is it?
So it's a little like beekeeping. You could probably talk to 100 people and get a different definition, but ultimately, we are inspired by that which is beautiful, true, and good. It's focused on virtue and integrating faith. St. George Classical Academy's mission is really around developing leadership so that our students serve God, serve their families, and serve community, and really bringing our children and shining the light of Christ into the community around us is incredibly important. Teaching our children to think critically and write well and speak well is a big part of that leadership component. But virtue formation and joyful learning that is also rigorous is really at the heart of what we're trying to do, while building a culture that is elevating and ultimately preserving culture for the future, for our children and their children to endure the times.
That's wonderful. Well, I think too, I mean, when you think about it, you can't really get educations like this in public schools. And it's sort of good that way because I don't know if I would want like the Congress voting on what kind of theology we're going to be teaching in school, right? You can't do spiritual things and be completely neutral in a public environment. But so it's so beautiful that we have this option of doing something else and going somewhere else and being able to really kind of control it, right? Like you can, I don't know, I'm in Texas. We just passed a law about you have to teach the Bible in schools. And I'm kind of horrified because I'm thinking, who's going to write that curriculum? It's probably not an Orthodox person. It's probably not informed by patristics or like talking about beauty or any of this, right? It's gonna be weird. And so, I don't know. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, and I think it's okay that we do it in a separate school because then you can make sure that the educator is really someone who's trusted with a child's spiritual growth, right? It's
I
such a
mean, we really do believe that the teacher is the curriculum and that our teachers are committed to living a virtuous life grounded in their faith. And that's such an important part of, I mean, the teacher is the point of contact for your child, and putting teachers in front of our students who ultimately we would want to teach our own children, I think is really at the heart of things too. It's so important. It's actually, in terms of one of the challenges of building a school, I thought initially it would be finding enough children and enough families. And that was kind of my focus as we were launching things. Do we have enough children to open the front doors? And what I'm realizing is that the demand is tremendous, and attracting teachers who are both qualified and virtuous and all of these, everything that we're looking for, that's going to be the biggest challenge.
That makes sense. I also would have thought it was getting students, but you're right. It's probably it's finding someone to teach them. But so okay, let's go back a little bit. You mentioned in your childhood, so your dad did great books, and your parents were reading to you guys. Tell me a little bit about that. Like, how were they? How do you feel that they were parenting in a way that kind of inspired you to think about education or upbringing as being about like developing beauty and a love for books and a love for I guess literature and culture in general, sort of. I don't know how you describe it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, how is it? What is it that they were doing? Because they weren't homeschooling with classical education, right?
Not at all. We all went to public school, but I think one of the beautiful things about the Orthodox tradition is the way that it's integrated liturgically into how we live our lives. And so ultimately, the church was at the center of our family life. And, of course, we celebrated all of the feast days, and we had so many traditions that we lived out in our home, whether it was obviously Pascha, there's so many traditions, Easter basket, all the things, and Nativity and St. Nicholas Day, all, so in terms of the liturgical life of the church, it was integrated into our lives. Um, and then in a family rhythm, Sunday dinners, and my parents embody hospitality. I mean, they are some of the most generous, hospitable people you will ever meet. And we were so blessed to have so many people visit our home and have Sunday dinner at our home and sit around the table and listen to their stories, whether they were a monk or a priest or of just somebody visiting who was coming through the area who we had invited. And so I think I can point to so many of those, the lives of different people and how their stories probably formed who I am. But in addition to that, my parents built a home and loved to collect art. So it filled with paintings and icons. My dad, in fact, our church has an extensive collection of antique icons that he has been able to curate over the years, from Russian and Greek traditions. So just really an interest in things that are elevating and beautiful. We also loved, again, we would go into Boston a lot and go to the North End and go to the museum and visit other people too. We were often invited into other people's homes. And so I think that life really existed around the church, and then our family life was very much an extension of that church family. And of course, there's it was very beautiful. And obviously, there's also some challenges with that as well. I think anybody who's been raised in a family where their father is a priest, there's also parts of that are challenging. You're in the spotlight a lot, and sometimes family comes after somebody else's needs, and so. But I will say with that, my parents have lived a life of service. And I think that probably inspired in me why I ultimately wanted to be a teacher. So my childhood it was beautiful in many, many ways. Not to mention, we actually grew up in a really beautiful town, Ipswich, which is on the ocean. And just the time we spent in nature, the Audubon Society, we used to go there all the time, or the beach. And so we also were raised in a very beautiful place, close to Boston, but yet an incredibly beautiful North Shore town. So that was a blessing.
Oh, neat. Well, and it does help give you an appreciation for beauty when you're really, you're going for a walk and you're seeing truly something beautiful, and you get that feeling. But as a kid, you're standing there on the beach and you're just thinking like, wow, this is so big, and God created this, and it's so beautiful, and it is actually a really wonderful thing to have, to be
It
able to
is.
feel like that.
The ocean in particular is so connective. It makes you feel connected to the rest of the world. And
It
there's a
does.
lot of scope for the imagination.
Yes, that's true. That's very true. That's neat. Well, so So I'm sure though, as having a dad for a priest, it probably complicates life in the parish too, right? I would assume that, like, I don't know, a friend of mine is a presbytera, and her husband's kind of thin, and she's constantly getting comments about how she has to like fatten him up, and she's not feeding him enough, and it's like just weird little things that go on in a parish that are funny. But it's different because your husband, your father, is the priest, and there's sort of everybody feels like they own him or something, like that they also have a right to him, that they're also the family, and they are, but it is a challenge.
When you're raised by a priest, people have a sense that they know you in a way that is perhaps more familiar than if you weren't the child of the priest. And I think
Yeah.
because of that, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but it's just an interesting way to grow up. I will say about the cooking comment in terms of your friend, fatten up your friend's
Right.
the priest. But my mom was an incredible cook, and she was well known for, she cooked for all the feast days and all the coffee hours and everything. She fed us well, we should say. We all have a deep appreciation for food. And as a result, I think a lot of our family life actually happened around the dinner table, whether it was Sunday dinner or the day to day dinner. But
That's a great place to have family life, right? I mean, there are all these studies on dinner together as a family and how important it is. That's
it's
neat.
funny. My dad is a much more, he's a big personality. And so I often attribute a lot of my formation to him, which is very true. But I will say my mom is quiet and stoic, and she was definitely the rock in our family. And she's just an incredible example of love and self sacrifice and service. And so together they were a great pair because she's a much more contained and sort of maybe introverted person, but they were a wonderful partnership.
That's beautiful. That's really neat. Well, so okay, so well. Let's see. You go to college. You're
Yes,
not thinking you're going to be a teacher, but you did end up working your way into being a teacher.
I
And
did.
what did you want to be instead? What were you thinking
You know,
about?
I was a little all over the place. I initially went to the University of Richmond. I was planning to major in business and in Spanish. I definitely wanted to travel. Um, I was totally all over the place. The range of things that I wanted to do was broad. It was like, but ultimately, I ended up transferring back to Simmons. I majored in communications and in art history, and I think pursued things that I loved when I was at Simmons. I took a lot of art classes and I really enjoyed them. I had the opportunity to study abroad. I went to England and I went to St. Petersburg and studied art. So that was tremendous. I think um, I ended up I had a 5-year college experience, but I ended up taking classes that I loved for the sake of loving them instead of thinking a lot about what I was going to do later. Whereas when I first went to college, it was all about, okay, international affairs or this, that, and the other. And so that was a shift that happened in college. And then when it ended, I ultimately kind of just dove in and went for my master's degree. And it was a good decision, honestly. It obviously led to a very beautiful life. So I am grateful for that.
Thank God. Thank God. That's wonderful. When you were talking about, you were a principal, you were an administrator in public school. Were you an administrator like during COVID?
I
And how
was.
was that in Massachusetts? Because in Texas, like we had school board meetings where parents were getting up and punching people, and it was just, it was wild because everyone was so divided here. Was Massachusetts less divided, or was it a weird time? I mean,
It
it
was
was
a
here,
very
but
difficult time, honestly. Everything was so politicized and it really changed education in many ways. The district where I was working at the time, I actually think did, given the government policies and sort of requirements. I think we did navigate it well. That being said, I mean, what does that even mean? I mean, kids were home and it was very complicated. So Yes, it was a divisive time. In addition to that, it changed how we use technology, of course. And I think the
Right.
classroom, obviously, everything went online. And so kids were on screens. And one of the things in terms of education that has since been true is that they really never came off of screens. Curriculum programs were rewritten according to um,
Mhm.
iPad, technology. And so that was one of the big shifts in education, I would
Yeah.
say.
Well, and in
But
some
yes,
ways in our
it has.
home lives too, right? I mean, before COVID, I have kids who are my kids go from 28 years old to 15 years old, right? And they're the older ones, they couldn't have the internet in their rooms. They couldn't have screens. Like after 9 o'clock, you put your screens here and all that. It was very structured and very clear. And then all of a sudden, everybody has to be in their room on the internet all day with their computers. And it changed it. All of a sudden, the internet became like it was all over my house. It was just, and it was different. It was really hard to dial things back. I mean, it was possible, but it was difficult, and it definitely we ended up more lenient about it afterwards than we were before because there was
Mhm.
just this whole shifting, and we owned devices we didn't have before, but it was really a mixed bag too going online. I think with education, like it's great that we were able to shift and online education is one thing, but like they were here anyway. We had teachers who had to be on the regular curriculum, which is not designed for online teaching. And then suddenly in a week, it's like spring break's over. Now you're online forever. And you don't have any awareness of what the right way to do that is. You're not prepared for it. It was rough. It was really a challenging time. I mean, I think it's good if you came through that unscathed because that was tough.
It was challenging on so many levels, to be honest. I mean, at the exact same time COVID happened, George Floyd happened. There were tremendous racial challenges and tensions. There were a lot of behavioral issues. People were having huge emotional struggles, of course, being isolated from one another. Obviously, some churches closed. So, I mean, we all lived through it. From a public education perspective, I think things just changed so rapidly, and it was so just so many vulnerable children. I mean, one of the things I did work hard to do was to bring kids back full time as quickly as possible and fill every single seat because everything was spaced out and this and that. But ultimately, if there was an unfilled seat, I tried to get that child in as many days as possible. But it was really, people were struggling. And ultimately, it did change education. And many people reflected and changed career paths, or, it was a very disruptive time. And I think probably for me led to ultimately moving towards starting a school.
Right. Well, it sort of seemed like, well, we're going to reinvent everything anyway, right? Everything's up for grabs. People are like, I'm a Manhattan businessman, but I can live in Tennessee. Like, and
Yes.
it's just like suddenly they all realize there are all these options. Life is short. Pick the right thing, go do the thing you want. So it makes sense. I
Mhm.
mean, it's a moment where things like that happen. People move across the country, people change their
Yeah,
lifestyle, go from big city to being a farmer or something. Like it
I
just
know.
all kinds of things going on. So it makes sense to look around and decide to make a change at that point. But also, I would think at that time, you would be thinking about education in terms of like this relational aspect and what it means to be in person or not be in person or to be together and what kind of communion is necessary for a healthy, good education. So I mean, it makes sense to me that you would even in that time that it would just call to you to want
Mhm.
to build this beautiful thing. So,
Interestingly, I had been living in Somerville, which is right next to Cambridge, Boston, a very hot neighborhood. I lived there for 17 years, actually. And so right before COVID, I bought a house in Ipswich, the town where I grew up. And so I definitely was thinking of moving, not just in the direction of living in Ipswich, but making a change because buying a house in Ipswich meant that my commute was significantly longer. So I was probably going to have to move in a different direction at some point. I had been in that district for 8 years. Um, and So I think, things kind of came together. COVID happened. And then ultimately, did stay in the district where I was an additional year to kind of stabilize things, but then moved to a much smaller school district. I went from a school of 550 to a school of like 220, knowing I think that it was a would give me space to figure out what I was going to do. And so I stayed in that tiny little school district for 2 years. And during that time, I wasn't 100% sure it would all come together to start a school, but I certainly knew I wanted to go in a different direction and simplify things in a way. And so, anyway, it did lead to starting the school.
Well, so how exactly did it happen? So you were saying you were investigating classical education. So
Hmm.
was it an apprenticeship, the program you were in?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Are you?
you had now a lot of knowledge about it. So
I
how
mean,
do you do
classical
that? How do
education
you
is a
move into
journey. I feel like I'm on it for the rest of my life because there's so, there's so much to learn and there's so much to read and there's so, anyway.
well, even the word classical, right? Like we're referring to like thousands of years of history. We're not, it's classical isn't necessarily like, oh, it's this period in ancient Greece. It's really, it's a lot of things feeding into it. There are a lot of, I'm sure there's a lot of variety, but maybe that's part of why it's so beautiful, right?
It
That there are so
is.
many ways to pursue beauty and to think about virtue and truth and goodness, and how lovely that that's
I
not just one
actually,
thing.
I really loved the apprenticeship. I will say, it was life changing. I know that sounds dramatic, but it definitely changed my life. And it's a 3-year program, and you read books together and you come together in person twice a year for a week in this kind of retreat environment. You share meals, and there's a lot of different traditions associated with it. When I first applied, I didn't really know very many people within the Cersei Institute, and I applied into the apprenticeship that would work according to my vacation schedule, and by the grace of God ended up with Heather Shirley, who was my head mentor, and her apprenticeship group was all women, and it wouldn't have been something that I realized I needed, but I think at the time it was such a gift to be journeying for these 3 years with these women, which each year a few people graduate and then more come in. It's set up that way, but it was such an incredible um, time of reflection and self growth, and really through the apprenticeship, I made friends that I imagine I'll be friends with them for the rest of my life. So.
That's beautiful.
And
That's
sorry, but it was also, I showed up on the first day and Heather had us share what is our goal going through this apprenticeship. And, just spontaneously, I said I would love to live a more integrated life. And so, I think about how my life has changed since I started the apprenticeship, even until I graduated from it. And I definitely, God answered my prayers. My life is much more integrated. It's very integrated in a beautiful way. So anyway, it was an incredible experience, a standalone experience. Of course, it's also kind of gave me the confidence, I think, to move forward with the school project in certain ways. But in and of itself, it was just such a meaningful time in my life.
oh, that's beautiful. But I think all the best things are kind of like that, right? Like as a standalone experience, this is a beautiful thing. But then God's going to use that for the next thing, right? Like
Hmm.
he's always helping you take all these skills or wisdom or whatever it is that you've gathered somewhere and then apply it to the next thing. I always feel like when I look back, I'm like, oh look, because I did this
Hmm.
went much better. And I knew what to do when I got here. And I don't know, it's nice. Sometimes it feels structured like that. But
I couldn't agree more, especially when I think of everything, all the skills that I gained through my career in education. I mean, what a gift.
right,
So,
absolutely. Well, so when you're graduating or finishing the apprenticeship, how does that now translate into, so you've got a job at an elementary school, you finished the apprenticeship, you've got free time now, and now you're thinking about a school. How do you make that jump? Like how do you get it going and get it started?
well, basically, I think so I'm just thinking of the timeline. So I started the apprenticeship. Year one was my last year in my former school district. And then the second and third year I did while I was in the small little school I was recently in on the North Shore. And it was I think I was about a year, halfway through the apprenticeship and had just started this new position in the tiny little school. And a lot of the challenges that I was seeing in the new school mirrored the challenges I had seen in the larger school. And so that was a time of reflection because ultimately I was just saying to myself, am I going to do this for the rest of my life? This is not how I want to use my God-given gifts, and it is not how it's just not reward. It wasn't rewarding for me in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
It just everything, honestly, everything felt like a fight, if that makes sense. It was a lot of energy, a lot of work, and I constantly felt like I was fighting against things. And it's not how I wanted to live my life. And I had been thinking about starting a school. I just didn't know how it was going to come together. And I was in the church kitchen one evening, and has a little bit of a challenging time. And this guy who goes to my church, was in there, and I had talked to him a couple of times, but I didn't know him very well. And I said, I just want to start a school. And he listened. Anyway, he emailed me a couple of weeks later and he said, if you want to start a school, I'll help you. And so the school is a love story. I don't know if you know that, but ultimately, so we together, and I knew that he might be somebody interested in the school because about a year earlier we had a conversation, but the timing, he is in academia. His background is math and science. And I knew that through his own faith journey and journey in academia, he was also kind of considering other paths. And so I knew of him as a possibility. But anyway, after that exchange in the kitchen, after he emailed me, we sat down and wrote a business plan. And I knew somebody who would help us incorporate and get things kind of off the ground at that end. And so we spent it was like the 2 weeks leading up to Pascha and then the 2 weeks following it together, writing this business plan, and started the incorporation process. And then I think that was like April. And then he came to me in June and he said, I don't think this relationship can be contained to the professional. And and I was so angry. I wouldn't talk to him for like 3 weeks because I thought he was going to ruin the school. It was never going to work out. It's like the stakes were pretty high. We're now in this partnership, and like, what am I going to do? I mean, I will admit, retrospectively, we definitely had a lot of chemistry, but it was obviously complicated. But anyway, I kept it to myself. And then like a week later, I wouldn't speak to him, by the way. We went on like a 3-week hiatus. The incorporation process had started and whatnot.
Poor guy. I mean,
So we went on a walk one day with my sister and I told her about it. And I was pretty close-lipped about the whole thing. And she's like, go for it. And at this point in time, I was single. I hadn't met somebody. I really wanted to meet somebody, but I'd kind of, in a way, I settled into my life in a certain kind of way. Anyway, so I started thinking about it, and then we talked, and I was going to the Holy Land for a few weeks, and I said, I'm going to pray about it while I'm away. And then I came back at the end of July, I believe, and we were engaged at the end of October, and we got married in January.
oh my
And then we opened the school in September. So it was kind of a whirlwind, but
Oh, wow.
and honestly, back to God's timing and just things coming together. The school never could have started without our partnership, because the amount of work and the amount of sort of dedication and just the intensity of a project like this, I really needed his help. I couldn't do it without him on multiple levels. He's very talented, but in addition to that, taking the financial leap when you're single and you own a house and you're paying a mortgage and not being, there's a lot of risk involved in that. So again, it feels like one of the great miracles of the school.
It
So
is. Absolutely.
anyway, that was the beginning of James and my relationship, which is still very young and has been, this whirlwind. Now, we did not expect for him to come on full time at the school as a teacher.
Mhm.
He was working at UNH. He was working for NASA. He's an astrophysicist. That's his background. And, um, he was going to pay the bills and I was going to start the school. That was the
Right. There
plan.
was some security there.
But ultimately, last January, we had promised an education to our families and the children, and we felt that in order for us to deliver that, he really needed to come on as a teacher. So he left his role and came on at the end of last January and started teaching the math K through 8. So as he said, I never imagined I'd be a kindergarten math teacher, but it was
Right?
one of the best experiences. He loved it. And not only that,
Oh,
we launched our high school this year. So we started pre-K through grade 8. And then he and another really talented gentleman launched our upper school with 9th and 10th grade, and we'll grow it, of course, through 12th grade. But having that foundation, I think, of understanding the continuum of math development and education has been incredibly informative to him. And he's now taking on the role of curriculum director here at the school while teaching the upper school math and science. So
that's cool.
we're finding our way, but it was a big, unexpected kind of
Right?
transition.
That's neat. So, I mean, that's a big change for him too. Like to go from NASA to kindergarten math. Does he really love teaching, or how's he like? Does part of him kind of maybe someday I'll go back to NASA? Like, is that? Does he feel like this? He just stepped into a new calling, and
He loves it. He says it's his dream job, and he's so talented and he's a very present person. And I think he's found what he loves. Obviously, it will ebb and flow in time as the school grows in terms of his role. Um, of course, math and science is his background. He also joined the Cersei apprenticeship, which he's graduating from this summer. So he um, loves the humanities as well. He's teaching himself Latin, which was ultimately because we're thinking about the classical languages and how to time those in the progression of the curriculum. So he's taken on so many different parts of it, but I think this is our passion project. This is our life together. So I don't think he's going back to NASA.
that is
He's not
so neat.
allowed to.
This is beautiful. It's really something, because I think sometimes, we get in our culture, we'll get very caught up on, I have a lot of education. I'm an important person. I do this, scientific, wonderful research job or whatever it is. Um, and we don't always value like creating, like, well, nurturing humans, right? Like, it's sort of an afterthought for a lot of people. A lot of us want to stay home with our children and are able to, thank God. But there are a lot of people too who are just not particularly concerned about it, and it's just they're going about their business, and the kids are probably fine. And I mean, I love, first of all, intentionality in parenting. Like, I just think it's very critical, and we don't have a lot of it. But what a cool thing to just see the beauty in that and the value in that. And you know what I mean? Like, not just like, oh, you're a stay-at-home mom instead of doing anything, but it becomes, no, my career and my passion and the meaning of my life is nurturing these human beings and, doing God's work in their lives. That's incredibly moving. That's very beautiful.
I
What a
think
neat thing.
James is very moved by, or he's inspired by developing leadership in students and really believes that in order to preserve Western civilization, we need to educate the next generation of leaders. And he believes that the impact we can make, and I agree. I mean, this is the work we're trying to do as a school, is so much bigger than ourselves, and we actually need to do this to serve God, but ultimately to preserve our culture. And so that is a much bigger impact, I think, than flying satellites, on the outer where
Right? I mean, when you have the
Earth
right
didn't
perspective
even know.
about these things, it really is
I
actually a more critical mission than.
It is. It definitely is. The importance of education and families having options and the faith integration and serving community and living, one of the biggest shifts I've noticed moving from my career previously to this environment is how the day-to-day life of this, they're living within the context of the school. They're outside, they're eating together, we're praying together, we have tea time, they're reading, and it feels like the rhythm of their life. Whereas I think in my last schools, it was more siloed somehow. It wasn't as integrated. And so it felt like you went to school and that's where you did school and then you went home. Or for me professionally, like this is where I do my job. And it just didn't have the same flow and integration as an environment like this. So has been it's been beautiful to create that and nurture that here at St. George.
That's so beautiful. That's really neat. So how long has the school been open?
Just a year and a half. And honestly, it's mind blowing because I think people walk through the door and think we've been open longer than that. But it's a very short amount of time. Last year, we started with 21 students. So very small, but incredibly dedicated founding families. And it was kind of like a big homeschool. It was a really beautiful year. And then this year we jumped to 53, it was a big
Oh,
jump.
more than double. Yeah, it sure is. It
And
is.
we added the ninth and 10th grade. And then next year we will basically cap our enrollment at 75.
I see.
So, um,
Kind of control the growth as you go up, or do you want to permanently cap it at 75?
no, our goal is to grow to about 250 over the next 10 years, pre-K to 10, pre-K through grades 12. So all the levels, but we want to do it slowly.
Yeah,
So
well, I mean,
we have to do it
it's too
slowly. I
late
mean,
to do it slowly, actually, because you're already
it's
moving
necessary.
along. Like, that's amazing. I love that, though. You're just so quick. You're like, I want to start a school. He's all started with you. And then it's like, boom, there's a school. Like, it's incorporated, it's happening. I want to get married. Okay, let's go. Let's do it. I love that because I'm always doing stuff like that. And people are looking at me like, I'll be sitting there. I'm like, I have an idea for a book. I'm just writing it like soon. And then I'm finishing it because it's like, I go. Like if I'm going, I go. I like that about your story. It's cool. It's really neat. It's inspiring.
I'm not always that way, but I think when I dive in with my whole heart. So it kind of happened that way.
I love that. Well, and maybe that's part of the secret for success. Like with this, you can't really go halfway into it. This is a big project. And like you said, it's integrated into your life and the lives of the students, but that also means it's big. It's a big project. It's bigger
Hmm.
than just kindergarten class learning math. It's a whole human, holistic, beautiful thing.
Hmm.
How do you guys live out the liturgical year in the school setting? I like thinking about that. I always think it's neat to see what schools are doing. What do you
Yes.
guys do?
So we start our day every morning in morning assembly with all the children, and each day has kind of a different focus. We'll have art study, we have Lives of the Saints on Thursdays, we have recitations on Fridays. We always pray together. And then we invite local priests to come for different blessing. We call them blessing services, but like Malebans or paracleses. So for instance, yesterday we celebrated the feast of Saint Theodora. And so we had a feast together after for breakfast, after a service. We celebrate the great feasts. So Theophany, we did a big blessing and procession. Of course, we'll celebrate St. George Day in May.
Right.
We, so different feast days, we emphasize St. Nicholas Day, St. Nectarius, and then, of course, the great feasts. One of the things, though, I will tell you is that we do not have divine liturgy at St. George Classical Academy. I know some Orthodox schools do. We have intentionally decided not to. And the reason is that not all of our students are Orthodox Christians. Some are Catholic or Protestant or come from mixed faith background, and we want every child to fully participate in the life of the school. And it's actually been very, very beautiful, bringing just bringing children into the tradition and sharing with them the rich Orthodox faith. And I do believe it's an important part of what we're doing, that every child can fully participate. It's been beautiful. We teach scripture, and that's woven in. Of course, at the upper grades, as much theology and such is integrated into the humanities. We have, we right now, for instance, with the Synaxarion and things, we're teaching into the Sundays leading up to Great Lent and then Pascha. But we pray together at lunch. It you feel the ethos of the faith within the school, and it's very beautiful. Last year, most of our children were Orthodox Christians. This year, we have brought on a number of Roman Catholic families as well as Protestant. So it's growing, and it has brought so many people together. I will also share that there are, I believe, 30 Orthodox churches within about 20 miles from us, and we represent 10 of them in our second year. And I think that's been another just gift of bringing kids together who are geographically in a region, who come from a Greek background or Russian or American convert or go to an OCA church. And so, or Antiochian or whatnot. So it has been so connective. And I think that means a lot to me, honestly, just in terms of the work, is connecting Orthodox Christians in a way that goes beyond our parishes and goes beyond the different dioceses.
Well, and I think it's so important. Right? I mean, I think ultimately, I used to tell my kids when they were little, I was like, the devil's project is to tear people apart and isolate them, and God's project is to bring us together. So, think about what you're doing. Does it bring us together or tear us apart? But it really, it's such an important goal, I think, as Orthodox Christians, to sort of build this pan-Orthodox love for one another and just even awareness of each other. I know years ago it felt like, and it's probably still true in some places, but I felt like people I moved from the Serbian jurisdiction to OCA, to the Greek church, and it was like they just really didn't know each other and understand each other. And they would talk about other churches, and they'd be like, oh, that one's really liberal. Those guys are really true. And it's like, I don't even know what you mean by liberal when I'm moving around, because I don't really see that. And I think it's just so beautiful. The more we can do to have ministries that really help people understand that there are a lot more of us than we think, maybe, because we only notice our own jurisdiction. So
It's been such a gift. And one of the great gifts of the school last year, 50% of our student population was bilingual. And I think we had 9 different languages spoken in homes. And so we ended our year with a multicultural potluck and folk dance where we did all different dances, representing the different backgrounds of our students. And so that continues to grow as well. It's which is a gift of Orthodoxy, honestly. You get a lot of multiculturalism, people from different heritages, which I value. So that's been something beautiful in the school too. Different people have different traditions. So it's been really great.
It is like, unique kind of from America or Australia. We have this view of like all these different traditions, and they all speak to the same thing, but they look different, they feel different, and they're all beautiful in different ways, or maybe in the same way. But it's so neat. It's really a beautiful, unique thing about being kind of in the New World Orthodoxy, right? Like, you probably don't get that in Greece or in Lebanon, but here we have this feeling that Orthodoxy is a million different beautiful traditions. It's wonderful. Anyway.
And I'm American. My parents converted before I was born, so I also, of course, value the American convert experience, and that is so much a part of who we are. And that's ultimately what connects us, actually, at St. George's. We're Americans, and we come from these different cultures, but we share this. And many of the students are Orthodox Christian, and then, of course, those who aren't are Christian, and we share that as well. So it's been very connective and a true gift.
It's beautiful. One of my favorite things is that there are cradle Orthodox born to converts. It's just so cool. It's like, well, are you a convert family? Like, we almost think of like, well, you're American, so you're a convert, but you're not. but your parents were, and it's very
Mhm.
beautiful. It's really neat. It's really neat. Anyway, I'm excited about this. What a great school. I hope that things continue to go well, that you're able to slow it down, just 75, that you can do that successfully and make sure that the growth is really sustainable and beautiful. But
Mhm.
gosh,
Thank
good luck to you.
you.
What a beautiful program. It's so nice to meet you, Juliana.
It's nice to meet you too. What a great opportunity to talk with you and share the story and meet other Orthodox Christians who are doing wonderful things. So thank you.